Welcome to A Word of Hope for Thursday of the 32nd week in Ordinary Time. I'm Father Don Gergen, and it's good to be with you again. We have an interesting text today from Paul's letter to Philemon, a text we maybe do not often hear, a letter from which we do not often have much to learn, we might think. A very short letter. But let me give you the background. Philemon is a renowned convert of St. Paul, dedicated follower of St. Paul, and Onesimus is his slave who has escaped, run away, perhaps even taken some property and things with him. And so Onesimus ends up, in his effort to escape, in prison, where Paul is also in prison. And so in prison, Paul brings Onesimus also to Christ. He is converted. So now the situation is somewhat complicated. If Onesimus returns to Philemon, there is a risk, and yet that's what Paul is asking of him, to return and see what Philemon will do. It's a risk, of course. One doesn't know. Will he be enslaved again? Will he be punished? It's also a risk for Paul because Paul's asking Onesimus to do this and writing and asking also Philemon to accept him not as a slave, as a returned slave, but as his brother in Christ. It is a risk for all of them. What should Philemon do? He is now a disciple in some ways of St. Paul. He believes in Christ. This new man who returns to him is also a believer. They are brothers in Christ. This is, of course, something very strong in Paul, that in Paul there's neither slave nor free, Greek nor Jew, that kind of thing. In other words, once Onesimus believes and is in Christ, then Philemon ought to actually respond to him differently, not any longer as a slave, but as a brother. It has a lot to say to us today about how we are called to be brothers and sisters, all of us in Christ, brothers and sisters, whatever the differences that might separate us. I just want to mention that I'm very aware in the past months, thinking and reading, how much white supremacy has been a part of our history, keeps coming up again and again. I'm not saying it in any particular political way. It's just that we need to own that fact. But if we are in Christ, those who are Christians, there can be no such thing as white supremacy. We need to pause and think about that and examine our consciences and say, are we also followers of Paul and therefore accepting the reality that we are all brothers and sisters in Christ? Thank you.